Yeah, welcome everyone to the NGEX Diaspora Speaker Series on managing assets in the diaspora while living, managing assets in Nigeria while living in the diaspora. Today we have panelists from Emerging Africa to give us some expert advice on how to go about managing, inheritances, property, investments, land, and other assets in Nigeria while we're living in the diaspora. Like we all know, it's pretty challenging, dealing with things in Nigeria while you're out in the diaspora. And so they're here today to just tell us that it's not as big of a deal as we think it is. And by dealing with them and their trust services, we'll actually be in good hands. So I'll start off with introducing the panelists. We have Felicia Shonubi, who's the MD of Emerging Africa Trustees Limited. And then we have Olutoye Sani, who is the head of trust services and runs the UK office for Emerging Africa Trustees. Welcome, everybody. And I'll give you a chance now to introduce yourselves further and introduce Emerging Africa Trustees and tell us more about trust services and what you can do for us.
Thank you, Obina. Thank you so much. It is indeed a privilege and an opportunity to showcase what we have to offer for Nigerians in the diaspora. We actually have a passion for those who are outside and consistently have issues with assets that are in Nigeria and assets from their inheritance, or their parents are old and they don't know what to do about it. We have a passion for it. And so it is in this vein, or in the light of this, I decided to collaborate with NGEX to have this webinar. And we hope that at the end of this webinar, we would have indeed achieved and enabled most of us that are attending, who have taken the time and trouble to attend, to go away with a more clarified position on what to do with assets in Nigeria, despite the fact that they are far away. So my name is Felicia Shonubi, as already introduced. I'm the Managing Director, CEO of Emerging Africa Trustees Limited. My colleague is here and would introduce himself as well. Olutoye.
You're on mute.
No, I can't. Am I muted? I'm not.
Oh, sorry. I'm the one.
Toye was.
Apologies.
Yeah,
Okay. So good morning to members from the US. Good evening to attendees from Nigeria and also from the UK. Today, thank you. My name is Olutoye Sani, as the host already mentioned. And as he has mentioned before, I am the head trust services at Emerging Africa Trustees Limited, and also the director of our UK office, Emerging Africa UK Limited. Today, we will be talking on, managing your assets. We have from managing your assets in Nigeria from the diaspora, and using private trust services as a tool to that effect. My colleague Damlala would also be here assisting with sharing the slides. And I don't know if we can now start on the presentation itself.
Right. Yes, we can go ahead and proceed. Before we start, I'll just give a brief overview of how this session will run. So we'll have a brief presentation where they'll walk us through what the services are and how their services can be useful to the diaspora. And then after that, we'll go into a fireside chat where we'll have a conversation around issues that are of importance to the diaspora. And some questions were sent in during the registration, and we'll have them answer those questions as well. And feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And at the same time, please, we'll be sharing a link where you can share to your friends and have them join the webinar. They can either register or they can watch it live on YouTube as well. It's currently being streamed on YouTube as well. Okay, so please go ahead, Toye. Please unmute.
So thank you. And as stated before, I will be speaking on, managing your finances and assets in Nigeria from the diaspora and using our private trust services to that effect. I'll quickly start with an introduction of, the Emerging Africa Group and also the Emerging Africa Trustees Limited. Okay, so again, the Emerging Africa Group, we can just see a quick whatever. But for Emerging Africa Trustees Limited, we are a trust company in Nigeria. We provide public trust services, private trust services, and corporate trust services. We have, professional experts in that. We're made up of a team of professional experts of over 3 decades of experience in that field. But today we'll be focusing on the private trust segment of our services. So the private trust services that we render are wills and probate services, education trust, living trust, family office, offshore trust services, charitable trust services, nominee and custodial services. And today I will just be giving you a brief overview of those services and how they could be of use to you in the diaspora. But before we start that, I'll first give an introduction of what a trust is. And I will start with giving a simple illustration of what a trust is so that it sounds practical to you. Centuries ago, during the Crusades in Europe, we had, soldiers that were leaving Europe to go and fight in the Middle East. And one of the concerns of those soldiers was what would happen to their families if anything were to happen to them during the war. If they were to lose their lives, what would happen to them? During that point in human history, it wasn't like women could exactly inherit and manage properties. If they were to die and if they didn't have a male heir that was old enough to inherit those properties, usually the properties would then be vested back to the king, and you can't expect the king to then be taking care of your family. And so, what a lot of people, or a mechanism that was devised to sort of handle this anxiety was that people would vest their titles to their properties to someone with integrity, someone that they trusted, and emphasis on trusted. So, and usually that would be maybe the bishop of your town, or a priest, or someone that, or a very good friend, who would then hold that legal title to your property, but will hold it on behalf of your family. So it would be expected that even though they sort of own your property, they are owning it on behalf of your beneficiaries, and they will continue to invest and manage those assets on behalf of your beneficiaries. And then maybe when your beneficiaries are old enough, they will then bequeath those properties back to those beneficiaries. So again, like I've stated in that simple illustration, sorry, if we can move back, sorry. So as I've stated in that simple illustration, you have 3 parties. You have a settlor, you have a trustee, and you have the beneficiaries. The settlor is the one that owns the assets, the one that is creating the trust. So to say, the trustee is the person that is holding those assets on behalf of the settlor and also on behalf of the beneficiaries. And the trustee is expected to invest and manage those assets on behalf of both the settlor and the intended beneficiaries that the settlor has stipulated that those assets should go to. So we can now move to the next slide, please. So I will be speaking briefly on the responsibilities and the functions of a trustee. Responsibilities. So the trustee is expected to, manage and grow the assets of the settlor on behalf of perhaps the settlor himself and also the beneficiaries. The trustee is also expected to distribute those the trust funds or the assets to the beneficiaries based on the instructions of the settlor. The trustee also has a fiduciary duty of care, a legal fiduciary duty of care towards the settlor and also towards the beneficiaries. The trustee is expected to act in the best interest of the 2 parties. And then, of course, he can be legally liable if he's found to be negligent in the carrying out of those duties. The trustee is also expected to, legally comply with all rules, all relevant rules and regulations regarding your properties, and also, again, like I said, the instructions that you have also left as well. And such, regulations involve tax filings and things of that order. If we move to the next slide, please. So we would then be focusing now on, how we can manage your finances on your behalf. So a good example is property and investment management. A good number of Nigerians are, they have properties, rental properties in Abuja, or rental properties in Lagos, and they're worried about how they can collect rents on those properties. How they can expect that, maybe they've left, we heard so many different stories about how people leave properties to people, to family or to friends to help them to manage, or they give, people money to help them to, build land in, the village and all of that. And we hear stories about how those people, misappropriate the funds that should have actually been used to that purpose. With a trustee, you can rest assured that that is not going to be the case. You can rest assured that, you can expect that trustee to be collecting rents for you on your behalf and be reporting all the funds that they have collected for you on behalf with respect to your property. They can also be expected to handle any repairs that need to be had on your property, and you can expect that, all the funds that should be used for that purpose are actually used for that purpose, and they are not cheating you in any form or way. They will also provide you with periodic reports on updates on how your, investments are, going and everything. Again, so if we can move to the next slide, please. We also offer offshore trust services. We have clients that have properties all over the world, not just in Nigeria, not just in the US. And you can basically have an offshore trust services that where we provide trust to you with all our international partners as well. And we make the management of your trust very simple. We harmonize it into one trust arrangement rather than you having different trust arrangements. We harmonize it into one trust arrangement that covers all your assets all over the world. And then we provide a centralized asset management service for you. And we also provide centralized reports to you as well on how all those assets are doing. And then we also help with privacy and also with, helping you to register your assets in places that have favorable tax regimes as well. We move to the next slide, please. So we also provide escrow and nominee services. We have, like as indicated in the case study, we have clients that have housing projects in Nigeria, and they might be worried about, if the money that they have actually put into that project is actually being used for what it's supposed to be used for. You can actually appoint a trustee to make sure that the trustee supervises how those projects are going, and also only releases money to the construction company when they have reached certain milestones that you have indicated that those construction companies should meet. We also provide nominee services. So as in that case as well, you have clients that want to keep their ownership in certain businesses private. We have clients that are worried about kidnappers and the rising rate of kidnapping in Nigeria, and so they don't want their information on whatever assets they own or whatever businesses they own out to the public. They want to keep it as private as possible, and we provide that for them as well. Move to the next slide, please. Education trust. So we have situations where, Nigerians, as in the case study here, you can have Nigerians that have lost their siblings, they have nephews that they're catering for, or they have children of their own that they're also catering for. And they want to ensure that the money that they actually send to family members, or the money that they actually send, is actually used for what it's intended for, right? It's not money that is being misappropriated. These children are actually going to the school that you have indicated that they should go to, right? And so what we do is we will create a trust arrangement where the money that you have set aside actually goes to the intended school, their child is actually going to the school that you expected them to go. It's not money that is then left to some family member for that purpose. We all have stories where, people that were of children of rich people have ended up not going to school because, those parents died and their family members misappropriated the assets of those parents. What we do is we prevent that from being the case of our clients. We move to the next slide, please. We also offer charitable trusts. We have clients, just as in the case study, we have clients that are in the abroad and they have specific or general charitable things that they're interested in. We ensure that we create a trust arrangement for you where the money that you have set aside for those philanthropic purposes actually makes its way to the intended beneficiaries. And part of what we do is we help to create a legacy for you. We help to preserve that legacy for you, because even when our clients are not, even when they are not in this world anymore, we still ensure that their estate or parts of their estate to go towards the trust, towards the charity organizations that they believed in. And of course, you can rest assured that there's a professional management of your funds towards that purpose. And we also help to get you any tax benefits that accrue to you as a result of your philanthropic goals. We move to the next slide, please. Family offices. We also offer comprehensive wealth management solutions tailored for affluent families. We provide assistance with finance, with legal, with estate planning matters across generations of those affluent families. That's it for family offices. If we move to the next slide, please. So again, people might have questions like, okay, I sort of understand what a trust is, but how do I set up one for myself? And so what we would do is we would have a meeting with Emerging Africa Trustees Limited, where we discuss your goals, your desires, your wishes, not just for yourself or perhaps also for your beneficiaries as well. We will do that through questionnaires, through forms that cover your personal data, your trust purposes, your assets, and your beneficiaries. In the case of offshore trusts, we would have meetings with not just ourselves, but our international partners as well, to again clarify what your goals are and to agree on plan and services that would cover those goals. And then we would then, in the process of completing your onboarding process, your registration requirements, we would have a meeting with other third parties, your tax advisors, solicitors, so that again we can get you the best that the best that you can get in terms of estate planning. We would then prepare, review, and execute a trust deed that contains how you wish for that trust arrangement to work. And we will then register your trust company, preferably, in a place that we think has a favorable tax regime that will work for you. And we will then have periodic follow-up calls and meetings where we discuss, any amendments that you might wish to make to your trust arrangements, whether you have new beneficiaries that you want to add or beneficiaries that you want to take out, or assets that you also want to include in the trust arrangement, or, any other new goals or desires that you have as regards trust arrangements. We have our group leadership that is comprised of Mrs. Nika Akande, CON, our group chairman. She's a two-time Minister of Industry in the Federal Republic of Nigeria and is also the immediate past president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We also have our group CEO, Mrs. Toyin F. Sonny. She has been in the industry for close to 3 decades as an investment banker, lawyer, a chartered secretary, stockbroker, etc. She retired as the group chief executive officer at United Capital, formerly UBA Capital PLC, a position that she held from January 2014 to June 2018. She has also received several awards, one of those awards being the All African Businesswoman of the Year 2017 by the CNBC Forbes Africa sponsored AABLA Awards. We can then move to the next slide, please. We also have our board of directors, one of those being our managing director, Mrs. Felicia Shonubi. She has, again, 30 years of experience when it comes to trusteeship, when it comes to investment banking as well. And yes, I think we can now sort of end this presentation and now focus on the next segment of the presentation. I think I'll give
I
I'll
think
give the mic over to I'll
let me
give the
just
mic over
quickly jump
to
in.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so I think you're being modest. You haven't spoken about yourself and your own number of years of experience, you know.
Okay. Well, there's also myself as well. I again, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, I am Olutoye Sonny, Head Trust Services at Emerging Africa Trustees, and also Director of our UK Rep Office. I have a decade of experience as it concerns the law and also as it concerns investment banking, project finance, and also trusteeship as well. So, yeah, thank you.
In addition to, just before we jump into the Obina, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in.
Yes, go ahead.
Anyhow, but, in addition to what Toye has said, I just wanted to add that we have been a bit modest in our introduction of our group and ourselves. For our group, we have, if we have about 10 subsidiaries, and in those 10 subsidiaries, we have asset management, we have microfinance banks, we have a fintech, we have advisory, Emerging Africa advisory, and all are duly regulated by the, for the microfinance banks, of course, we have regulated by the CBN. Whilst for us as a trust company, we are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. For the asset management company, it is regulated by Securities and Exchange Commission. Collectively, in trustees, I believe we have well over 100 years experience. I have over 30. My GCO, Mrs. Sani, whom Toye had introduced, has well over 30 as well. And then with Toye, so I just be rest assured that Toye had earlier stated that you're in good hands and well experienced professional hands that can handle your assets in Nigeria. And we have, much as we have Chinese walls in our subsidiaries, I just mentioned asset management advisory. We can also ensure that where there are assets that can also be handled by asset management company, situations where that is required, then asset management will come in. If it's advisory, I saw that one of the questions that was dropped was how to handle export and import and a business whilst away. Our advisory can jump in and do that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Felicia, for that, and thank you, Toye, for the speedy and well insightful presentation. You did cover quite a few things. And so now I want to just get into more of a free flow conversation here. And please, for the attendees, please feel free to post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A as well, and we'll get to them. So I'll just start off and I'll throw out some questions, and Felicia and Toye, feel free to answer. I think for most people in the diaspora, the bigger challenge is around trust, right? And interestingly, trustees and trust. And it's really around, certain scenarios that people either have heard of or have experienced, which is you want to get something done in Nigeria and you have the resources, the funds, but you don't have the people that you can trust to actually get the thing done. You've heard stories of people sending money to get a house built, and then when they get there, there's nothing. Or you get people saying, okay, they want to pay school fees for somebody, and then they find out that those things, or medical bills, or those things never existed. And I think from what you've told us here is essentially Emerging Africa Trustees can act as the eyes and ears for the diaspora person in Nigeria and execute things on their behalf, right? So can you walk us through the process? Like I know you did that in the presentation, but say somebody in the diaspora, let's give an example, wants to build property. Or let me even start with the more classic experience. We said this presentation is also going to be about inheritances, which is transitioning from one generation to another generation. So when you have a situation where somebody who is outside has inherited property in Nigeria, what's the kind of process that that person should be looking towards? Yeah, because a lot of people just feel that when these things happen, and there's, property to be inherited, you can just easily make some decisions and then share that property amongst yourselves, right? But there are a couple of situations where either the parent dies and there's a will, or the parent dies and there's no will, and then there are siblings who are, interested in the property. And sometimes it creates some strife, and then sometimes it doesn't. But in today's world, where you have families where everybody's scattered around the world, even just managing the assets when there's agreement can be challenging on its own. So if you can give some insight into, what kind of processes, are needed in Nigeria to ensure that there's firm ownership and visibility into the legal structure that's needed, and then how to manage that kind of process.
Thank you, Obina. First and foremost, a lot depends on whether the parents that passed on left a will or died intestate. Died intestate means he didn't write a will. But for us, with Emerging Africa Trustees, if you appoint us, what would usually happen is that if the parent did not leave a will, we'll assist to process letters of probate, which means we'll go to the probate registry and try and process it. So typically, if you appoint us, that's the red tape and all the bureaucracy that you typically experience. We have experience in it. We have experienced hands in Emerging Africa Trustees that can sort out that process. And if there's a will, we'll get it also processed at the probate registry. Either way, a lot depends on what the parents, the situation that the parent left there. And of course, it's easier if there's a will in place. But either way, we've handled such transactions or such situations, and it's not a big deal for us.
Okay, so I guess the question here is,
continue. There are I've received some messages that they can't see Toye or I in the webinar.
Oh, really? Okay. You're visible.
Oh, okay.
I believe I'm visible from here. I can see myself.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay, I've just gotten confirmation that you can see all three of us now.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
But if I think I think Mrs. Felicia has really said everything that needs to be said concerning the question that was raised. How can you protect your assets? If I remember, that's the question, right? In terms of people being scattered all over the world, and in terms of protecting it from rival claimants. Is that the question?
Yeah, the question is around, like inheritance, right? Where you have a situation where, there's inheritance out there, but, and so what's the typical process, right? That's recommended, right?
Okay. So again, it depends on the situation where how the person died, so to say. That's the person with the estate, right? If they died intestate or if they died with a will. If they died with a will, things are much simpler. If they died intestate, things are much more complicated. If they died intestate, then you then have to make an application to the courts. This is where a letter of administration comes into play, and the courts would have to look at the family member, typically who is the oldest person, or typically who is if the next of kin, which one they feel is much more responsible, and they will then appoint that person as the executor and also to administer the estate of that person that has died, and they would then be in charge of distributing the assets of that person that has died. This again can be, in Nigeria, I think all of us are already what's the word I'm looking familiar with how things can be, in terms of court processes, in terms of bureaucracy and everything. It could take quite a while, and it could also be it could be time consuming. It could also be financially expensive as well, with the way bureaucracy works in Nigeria. If they died with a will, you would still be expected to go to a grant of probate, which is basically the court recognizing that will as a binding document, because anyone can present a will. So the court will have to, look at the content of the will and recognize that this was actually, done by the deceased. And you would have situations where people that feel that maybe they are not favored by the deceased, or people that whatever might come and dispute that will. So again, that could also be a time-consuming process for you. It could also be a very expensive process of you, the going to court, going back and forth to court and everything. And of course, those assets, there will usually be an injunction of those assets. So you can't even touch those assets while that will is being disputed. And so for example, the deceased has children. Those children may not be able to go to school until everything has been, all the T's have been crossed and all the I's have been dotted and all the issues have been, fully resolved. But if you have a trust, that sort of, again, it sort of skips all that process. A trust can basically activate automatically it can even be activated while the client is alive, right? So you can have a living trust. And once the person, if the person were to die tomorrow, again, to activate automatically on behalf of those beneficiaries without having to go through any sort of bureaucracy, without having to go to court or anything. It protects again, because of the privacy also of your assets and everything. People don't even know what to dispute. They don't know the details of your trust for them to even go and fight it in court and anything. So again, it protects your beneficiaries, it protects you as well from any rival claimants, from any time wasting process and everything. Because you are not even, the beneficiaries don't even hold the legal title to those properties. The company is the one holding the legal title to those properties on behalf of your beneficiary. I don't know if I've been able to fully explain it to you. But again, if anyone still has any questions, they can send an email to our company and we can try to again answer it much better for them.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. We just got a comment in here that says the living trust makes more sense. So I think that's good validation there. So yeah, so if I understand correctly what you've said, right? It sounds like it's probably better, just like Mr. Shehu said in the comments, it's probably better to even have this structure in place before the transition happens, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
And this is definitely something that Emerging Africa Trustees can help with.
Yes.
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 That's why we are here.
Okay. So that's good to know, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of questions came in, some in the Q&A as well, and I'll get back to those shortly. But staying on the topic of will, there was a question around. Sorry, 1 second. Well, does the concept of will apply equally to both male and female in Nigeria?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I was even going to point out that you can even have a will and put it inside a trust. So just because you have a trust doesn't mean you can't have a will. You can have a will and put it inside the trust. You can have a life insurance policy and also include it inside the trust. So the trust is just an umbrella that contains all these things. Does a will apply to men and women? Again, it depends on certain. So under normal circumstances, yes. But you find that, in parts of Nigeria, so take for example in the north, where there's also the Sharia law as well. When people are no longer in this world, depending on the location, sometimes Muslim Sharia law is expected to also take into cognizance when it comes to estate planning and how their assets should go. And you find that in some situations, depending on the state you are in, Sharia law may take more precedence or may take higher importance than the will that you have put aside. right? So you find that, and of course, in Sharia law, there are certain ways in which men are treated and certain ways in which women are treated, right? So you can find that, in such a place, the will might not necessarily apply to men as it is to women. Again, not because of the
No,
will,
but
but because of the Sharia law that's applicable in that state, right? But I would like to point out that if you have a trust, that again protects your, beneficiaries, whether they are men or women. They will be treated as far as the federal law is concerned, and they will be treated, equally, before the eyes of the federal law.
yes, if I may add to, I'd like to add to what Toye has just said about Sharia law. What Sharia law actually has percentages of what goes to a son, what goes to a daughter, what goes to a mother, father, relatives, so they have percentages. But there is a portion that, let's say out of 100%, 75% already spoken for, the portions, percentages that should go. So the 25% that is left, you have free will to do whatever you want to do. So that 25%, you can give it to just one person, male or female, regardless. But to answer your question, as Toye has stated, generally, yes, a will applies. It's what the testator, whoever has written the will, wants that applies to the will. If you want to give a higher portion to a daughter, it's your call because it's your property. It's yours to do it. It's your prerogative to share it as you will. So yes, on the surface, yes, we have to abide by the terms of a will for man or woman, whatever it is, for male or female, whatever it is the testator has written, how he wants his assets to be disposed of. Does that answer your question? I hope we've answered the question to whoever was sent that.
Yes, yes. So thanks for that, and glad that you even segued into the different. I don't know if it's different laws or different law structures. I know there's if I
Yes.
remember my civics well, there's customary law, there's Sharia law, and then there's I don't know what they call it. Well,
Common law.
federal
Penal
common law. There
code.
we go.
Yeah.
Right. So I think maybe we talk some more about that as well. I know you've talked about like Sharia. So in cases where, and especially like same even in parts of the South, right, where you have customary law, you hear people talking about this is a family property, a generational land or property. How does that, work with the will, right? So if so, for example, if generational property is willed out, does the will take precedence, or does the customary law come in and somebody can come in and say, hey, no, this piece of land came from our great grandfather. I don't care what my father said. You're not getting it.
How do I put it now? Your rights stop where the law stands, right? So you can't go outside what the law is. You can't say property that's been in the family for hundreds of years when it's now your turn to hand over to the family, so to speak. You now want to hand over everything to only your son. Meanwhile, it's family property, if I may put it that way. So in that regard,
Hello?
I think we lost her for a bit. Okay, she's back.
This is back.
Yeah, Felicia, you're on mute. So
so I was saying that your rights end where the law starts. You can't go outside what the law is. If your customary law, so long as it's not obnoxious, I think there's been a Supreme Court ruling on an obnoxious customary law. Do you understand? I mean, there are laws where they say you can twins should be killed. That's an obnoxious customary law years ago. So I'm just giving that rather extreme example, but really and truly, if it's obnoxious, one would have to go to court and then address the issue. But if it's a regular customary law that the customary courts agree to and have observed, then that property cannot just be passed to just anyone that you want. Don't know if that answers you. So do you have more to add?
No, I think. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think she's really covered everything.
Okay. Okay. So that's interesting. So I guess, we all need to pay attention to what our forefathers wished and try to make sure that we continue those as well. A couple of questions that have come in as well. One of them is it possible to create a living trust and will in Nigeria while the person lives abroad?
Yes, of course.
Mhm.
Of course.
Yes. Yes, of course.
There's no reason why not to.
Okay.
As long as the assets are in Nigeria. So
Okay.
typically what we advise our private trust clients is for assets that are offshore, that are within the diaspora, like Toyin said, in the abroad with your assets there. So typically what we advise is you have an offshore trustee, and we have a collaboration with a very, very sound and experienced and professional offshore. We have a collaboration with an offshore trustee. So for your assets that are offshore, yes, you need an offshore trustee. But for your assets that are in Nigeria, you need a local trustee, a trustee like us, Emerging Africa Trustees, that will handle those assets. So back to your question, yes, you can set up a living trust and sort out your assets. Sort out your will and whatever in Nigeria through Emerging Africa Trustees.
Okay. So that's good to know. Another question is, in Nigeria, does the will have to be registered with the court to be valid?
Absolutely, yes. That's part of the process.
Oh, so that means,
and we handle that as well.
Okay, so that means a parent who wants to set up a will drafts the will and has to
We
file it.
assist you through the whole process. Yes, we assist you through the whole process. We assist you in the drawing up of the will. We give you legal advice if we feel that there are some decisions you've taken that may not hold water after you're gone. We assist through the whole process of drawing up the will, having it filed in court, and giving you your own duly stamped copy. Yes.
Okay. So that's good to know, and that goes into even what I wanted to ask next. So in cases where there's like going to court, attending court, or dealing with an issue in court, is that something that Emerging Africa Trustees will also handle, or does the I don't know, beneficiary, well, no, does the, I don't know what the word is anyway, but the person in the diaspora, will the person also have to go and get a lawyer, and then that lawyer liaises with the trustees, or the trustees just handle everything if an issue comes up?
If an issue comes up, the trustees will handle everything. And if there's need to go to court, of course, we'll liaise with the settlor. Settlor is whoever appoints the trustee. In appointing a solicitor, to handle the matter. And of course, we'll have oversight on everything that goes on. We have a fiduciary interest over the matter and over our clients. So we'll ensure that our clients' interests are well protected and covered.
Okay. So that's good to know. And then just to make sure, when we're talking about assets in here, we're basically talking about everything, from investments to property, everything can be put under a trustee.
Yes, Toye mentioned even your insurance.
Right.
So typically, when the trust is set up, there's a trust deed. So in that trust deed, in the onboarding process, we'll have a form where you will fill all the assets you want, that you want covered, your even your bank account. It's not as if we have access to the bank accounts, but it's good to have it there. We have most of these big banks are rich simply because, especially our men, they don't say what their accounts are. Only they know. So when they pass on, the wives don't know those accounts. And so the money's just like following them in those respective banks. And after, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Toye, money becomes bank's money.
Yes.
The money becomes bank's money. So with a trust in place, what happens is that all those, if you want, although we've already agreed that a trust makes more sense, but you have stated your bank accounts and all that. We don't need to know the balances, but it's a good protection of your assets. If you state insurance package you have, all of it. In gathering, in liaising with you and gathering information in setting up the trust, we get all of that. It's there in the trust. So that if one passes on, your beneficiaries do not lose out. There will be millions lying down and don't about it because they don't know their accounts or their account numbers. So yes, everything can be encapsulated in the trust deed. All your assets, your bank account, your insurance, your so can you name any other thing? Everything really.
Everything, yes. I would just like to
value, yes.
I would just like to
Jewelry.
yes, I would just like to quickly point out that trustees don't provide legal we don't provide legal advice. But we appoint solicitors that we know that we work with, that we trust, and we know the level of expertise in that subject. They then provide the legal advice to our clients, but we ourselves do not provide legal advice. We just provide our professional expertise as trustees.
Okay.
In the same way that we don't also provide tax advice, but what we do is we appoint the best tax experts in that industry or into that issue that provide tax advice to you as well.
Yes, and then I was saying everything, inclusive of even your pension benefits, can be included in your trust. We'll state where it is, which account, So
when you say, like, so for example, like with the pension benefits, does it mean that if it's included in the trust, then let's say the statements and everything get sent to the trustees?
If the client wants that, but typically
right.
It's just for us to ensure that all your assets are duly documented in the living trust or in your will, if you prefer a will. But yes, your pension benefits, you can state who it goes to in the living trust. We don't need to have access to the statement. Like I said, we don't need to have access even to your bank account, but it's just to document. I have an account with the so bank. You don't have to state the amount, nothing, just the account numbers, so that your beneficiaries will be aware of it when you're not there. And we've stated already that a living trust, even you can be a beneficiary. The settlor, whoever has appointed us, can be a beneficiary to that trust as well. So whilst you can be clauses in it that state that monthly, that's if you hand over control to us, monthly, you want a certain amount. That's where that's where we are even holding. For some of these living trusts, we have where we have assets, cash, not cash, sorry. Where then it becomes cash, but funds handed over to us to handle. We invest it appropriately as agreed with the client, and then there's an agreed return on it.
All right. So that's all good to know. So we'll circle back to this thing. So I know we started off talking about, like inheritance, and then you talked about going to probate and having the will, things like that. Now, and then you also talked about the court process, which can end up being tedious. Now, if somebody looks at everything and says, this court process is just too much, parent passed away, there's inheritance here, we're just going to just, share the property and just have an agreement and everybody just moves on with their own lives, right? We just have this informal agreement. I mean, why isn't that? I mean, I would think that that's what most people do in Nigeria anyway. So why wouldn't that be an option, right? Compared to the process of going through the courts and probate, and I hear you have to even advertise in the papers and things like that.
Are you saying why go with a trust rather than a will?
No, I'm saying the process. I'm speaking now about, say, inheritance itself, right?
Okay.
And typically, as I think from what I heard you say, is you still have to go through the court process regardless whether there was a will or not, right? At least some this thing, and that ends up being lengthy and also tedious, right?
Yes.
And I'm saying if somebody's looking at that and saying, hey, for me to, let's say the parent died intestate, and saying, okay, for me to go through the will, to go through the probate process and all that, it's going to take time, couple of years, and say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to forget about that. And then me and my siblings, we just have an agreement, there are four of us, there are four properties, everybody takes one, and we move on with our lives. And I'm saying I would think that that's what happens in Nigeria today. So why can somebody just do that and just bypass the courts and everybody just move on with their lives?
Well, I mean, again, it's not exactly again, you can have a gentleman's agreement with your family and say, if I die tomorrow, take care of my children, right? But this gentleman's agreement is not enforceable, right? You can't sue your uncle to court and say, my uncle was supposed to take care of me based on this gentleman's agreement that he had with my father, and and he refused to take care of me, right? Again, also, when we say take care of my children, it's subjective. Someone can say, okay, take care of my children. Okay, I put them in my house, but I didn't send them to school, but at least I gave them food. So again, taking care of my children is also a subjective issue, right? um Again, if you have relatives, if you have children, you have dependents, and you want the best for them, and you want to assure them of that best, you want to provide them the life that you wanted to provide them, if you were present and you were in control of things, in control of destiny, right? The best thing I would say is for you to go with a trust, because again, you can set out a will, you can include it in that trust. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But I would say, dying intestate is the worst thing you can do. Dying with a will is okay, but dying with a trust is even the best that you can
That's the
do
best.
for your dependents, because you are assured that their education is covered. You are assured that their living standards are covered based on the assets that they have. You have a gentleman's agreement, like I've said before. It's not enforceable. You can't hold anyone to that gentleman's agreement. People can decide to change or disappoint you based on that gentleman's agreement, and there's nothing you can do. And you don't want to leave the fate of your dependents in limbo. Again, even if you were to, die intestate, and things were to work out eventually, all those years that are spent, people disputing which is theirs and what is not theirs, and all of that, the fate of your children is being held in limbo, and they can't recover that time back. Time is something that you can't recover once it's gone. So, do you really want to put them through all of that? Again, benefits of a trust also is, you are protecting some of those assets from creditors. You might, because another thing is, if your parent or this person could die intestate, and then you have all these creditors that are coming from here and there saying that, oh, this person owes me this and this person owes me that. When you have a trust, you protect your assets are protected from all these creditors. Your assets are protected from, even when it comes to tax liabilities as well, because that's another thing we're not looking at. When it comes to inheritance tax can be quite steep, right? If I think, for example, in the UK, it's almost like one third. So, if you have a trust, that protects your beneficiaries from all those sort of tax liabilities that come with, with a will, or with dying intestate as well. So again, you are basically protecting the entirety of your estate on behalf of your children, and you are ensuring generational wealth. You're also ensuring that your beneficiaries cannot just waste your assets, right? So again, if you have all these properties, you can put stipulations and say, oh, I want to make sure that before my children have access to this so and so, they must first have a master's degree. So in a way, it's ensuring that your children, okay, they must first go to this finance class, and they must receive this sort of education as relates to how to handle finances and everything. So it's just another way of ensuring that or ensuring generational wealth, right? Which is not the case if you have a will. If you have a will, everything is just taken once and for all and distributed to everybody. What everybody does with your assets is left to them. with a trust, that is not the case. You can basically ensure that the trustees are providing for your children, for your grandchildren, for your great-grandchildren, right? As long as that trust is in play. We have so many cases where even when wills are left, we stated before, people can always come in and dispute those wills. We have, people that have polygamous families where, the person has left a will behind, and several factions of those family members are fighting and disputing over that will. And like I said before, those assets are now left in injunction. They are now wasting away. Let's say you have 20 cars, and maybe for the space of 5 years that people cannot use those cars, they are just wasting away. By the time everything is resolved after 5 years, those cars, because they've not been serviced, they've not been whatever, by the time it's 5 years later, they are not even in the shape as how they were, as at the point of when the person, or when the settler left this world. So again, when you look at all those benefits, it's and all those circumstances, it's better for you to just go with a trust.
Yes, thank you very much. So for
Okay.
in a nutshell, really, you were asking about the intricacies and all the, big in the bill and one dying intestine having to go to court. But with a trust, we don't go to court. There's no court process involved. All we need to do is get your aspirations, your wishes, your assets duly documented in a trust deed, and get it duly stamped by the stamp duties office. You have a copy, we have a copy. So there is no court process involved at all in setting up the trust. And further again to what you has, yes, there will be contention and all that, but we've not had any case that I can recall, and I've had well over 20 years in trust, of a trust being contested. But wills are contested regularly, is a done thing, especially in the contentious states like Edo, Benin, but they're contested every day,
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't even think that in Edo, Benin there will be a lot of contention. But just to thanks for
that's
that.
not
But
to say that they are contentious. So I'm just saying that
right,
most wills are contested regularly.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So interesting. So another question I have is, now, if the damage has already been done, right, to a interstate, a dispute, or well, let's say interstate at least, can a trustee be brought in? Can Emerging Africa be brought in at that point and then things now rolled up under a trust?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? So sorry.
So what I'm asking is, so the parent died intestate, and then let's say like right after everything's been sorted out, then it's time for the siblings to, I guess, look at everything, but there's no formal will or anything, right? At that point, can things be taken into a trust? I mean, so for example, there's no access to, say, the bank account, right? We just know the bank account, have no idea what's going on. Can all that be brought into the trust, and then, say, Emerging Africa Trustees will now take that over and then pursue, remedying the bank account situation and all these other things that might exist?
Yes, but what typically will happen is that, so were you going to take it?
No, please. You're the better expert. So
what happened, we're both experts, so you have well over a decade experience as well. So typically what happens, like Toyi has stated earlier, the ideal is to have title to those assets, whatever it is. So we would assist, or we would be appointed, we'll expect to be appointed to process excuse me, the letter of. So based on, if you have title, you can now, those assets can now be handed as trustees to handle, but we would ensure that we would have to ensure that you have title first to those assets before I'll take it over. So yes, your question is, can we hold assets? Yes, but the process is that we must ensure that you have title. So will engage you and and ensure that you have title through the probate court. Immediately that is done, and after that, we can now continue to setting up a trust.
Okay. Okay. So other thing that shocked me here is hearing about inheritance tax. I did not know that there is inheritance tax in Nigeria. Just quickly, can you give me like what percentage is inheritance tax and how is it applied? Because I'm not sure how many people in the audience know that there's inheritance tax in Nigeria. So maybe you can just quickly tell us a little bit about that and how it applies, and if it is possible to avoid it, besides not dying.
Yeah.
But
we're in business not to make you avoid anything that is legal. We'll only assist you to ensure that you do what is appropriate and right at any given time. Right. So having said that, I think in Nigeria, what we call it is probate tax. And it depends on states. Yes, for some states like Lagos State, it's 10% of the value of the assets. You know, for a state like Bayelsa, I processed my father's. My dad passed on in 2020 and had to process it. He died in Tennessee. He didn't leave a will. But the process in Bayelsa was simple. It was a flat fee and took little or no time. So for some states, and let me say for most states, is a percentage. For Lagos State is 10%. I believe for Edo State is 10%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Toye. But for a few states, it's just a flat fee. And I don't think it was more than 300,000 or so as a fee. I'm not sure it was even up to that, you know, that we had to pay to get letters of administration for my dad's estate. So yes, but it happens, but I think the maximum is 10%.
Yeah, so it's one of the ways that, you know, various states in Nigeria make money, because they know that, you know,
it's revenue for the state.
Yeah, you know, there's a saying that, you know, there are two things or three things that are sure of in this world, you know, debt and taxes, right? So it's one way of the government, because they understand that, you know, people will always, you know, God forbid, but people will always die. So one way of making money is, you know, when people come to do this probate systems, we collect 10% of the value of the assets that those people own as part of the probate. So if you are, you know, if someone is dying, leaving $1 billion behind, 10% of $1 billion, I think, is close to 100 million. I think so. The state has just collected 100 million just for granting you access to your, you know, to the wealth of your parents, right? You know, so which of course, you know, can be quite unfair. I mean, it's not even can be, it's quite unfair. Again, you know, so it trusts, you know,
is revenue. So
yeah, so it's
yeah.
but,
So
yeah.
Okay. So sorry. So does this apply to everything, including property, land, or just cash in the bank?
It applies to the total value of the estate. So they would ask for bank accounts, ask for the property, that's the land, everything. So 10% of it for Lagos State. I'm just giving Lagos State as an example.
Yeah.
Is there
so evaluation of the land will be conducted. There's an inspection unit at the land registry that will have an actual value of the property, commercial, current market rate. And so 10% of everything that is presented to the probate court. But you know, with a trust, it's not as if a trust is tax-free, but the assets that are held in the trust, they're already there before the person died. And what we are speaking of here is probate tax.
Right.
So probate tax, you're going to court, but this had been running before the person died. So it's something that is in existence. And, you know, it's more discreet.
Okay.
I would also like to point to your earlier question where you asked about, you know, if someone were to die intestate, can they still set up a trust? And, you know, again, the siblings, once they get a letter of administration, because they will still have to go through that process. Once they get a letter of administration, they can then, you know, include in that sort of, you know, come together, and agree unanimously on a trust arrangement for the beneficiaries of themselves based on what they have recovered and what we can also help them to recover.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, someone was asking, about market rate in Nigeria. I guess, yes. That's good to know. I'm sure there's a lot of shocked faces in the audience now learning about this 10% tax on whatever you want to take to the court. But anyway, as we learn, we'll engage Emerging Africa Trustees, and hopefully, we'll all be in, the best of hands out there. So we've talked a lot about the inheritance part, which is managing the assets or existing assets, and especially around probate. But I think you also mentioned the other service that trustees offer, which is executing activities on behalf of someone. So someone in the diaspora wants to build property or purchase land or do something, right? And for what you mentioned, the trustees can actually do those activities on behalf of them. So can you talk some more just quickly about how that will work, right? Is that like seen as a separate service, or is that all inclusive? There's been a question about how much your services are, but I'll leave that till we get to the end and give you a chance to talk a little bit about your service. But is that a separate service from if I'm coming in and saying, hey, I want to set up a trust to cover these assets, and how would it work?
So if I'm just getting your question correctly, you're saying if, for example, you're living in diaspora and you want to send money to, or you have a construction plan that you
Right.
want to set up, if that's a separate service, I mean, again, it can be both. It can be part of the service that we already rendered to you. Maybe you have a trust already with us. It could also be just part of our escrow services or our nominee services. Right, so we can set up a sort of escrow service, trust escrow service, where we would, based on the money that you want to set aside for that project, we would appoint a project monitoring consultant. And what we'll be doing is that while working with that project management consultant, we will be supervising that construction project that you have. You hear stories about people saying they sent money to their uncle to help them build a house in the village. And, now years later, they've come back and they've realized that their uncle didn't use the money for that intended purpose. If you were to work with a trustee, that would avoid all of that, because the trustee would actually appoint someone who would be handling that construction for you. And then based on the milestones, based on the stipulations, the wishes that you've had on that construction, we will be delivering money directly to that project management consultant to have that construction made. We'll also be ensuring that the material, so the cement, all of that is used for the construction is actually the best quality for the money that you are providing us as well. And and of course we'll be sending you periodic, so maybe we'll be sending, again, depending on you, the client, as well, but we'll be sending you quarterly updates. So we'll send you a picture of this is the property as it is now. Every quarter we'll be sending you those updates and those reports on how your construction is going. And you can rest assured that with the experts that you're working with, by the end of by the normal time, the average time that construction of that size should happen, everything will be done based on the standards that you have requested. We will also help you with perfecting your titles as well. So again, also if you are buying land in certain, because people can sell land that isn't exactly theirs. You have all these sort of land disputes. We can also help you to avoid that by hiring the best lawyers that would actually go check at the registry to ensure that all the land documents are actually intact and they're actually the rightful seller of those properties. And when we help you to either buy the land or to finish construction, we'll help you to perfect all the titles and all the necessary legal compliance that needs to be done as regards to that property.
Okay. So that's good to know. So if I think of some scenarios that people go through, things like, I want to buy property or land, right? I have family members that are in school and need to pay their school fees, or somebody is sick and need to pay their hospital bills. These are all things that can be run through your trust service.
Yes.
Okay. So how would that work? I mean, in terms of just setup, is it something where, somebody contacts, me and says, oh, school fees are due, and then I can just pick up the phone or send an email and say, Emerging Africa Trustees, please pay this person, or
Yeah.
like, can you just quickly
Yeah. Exactly. So it would be like our family office service, where
Okay.
we provide, a bouquet of services, a bouquet of wealth management services to you and to your, obviously to the family members as well. That's your beneficiaries as well. And so, for example, when it comes to like your education, right, we will be liaising with the school on your behalf. The school would send us the invoice. So when the term is over, school will send us the invoice for school fees. We will obviously report that to you, in the spirit of transparency, and then we will pay the school fees directly to the to the school itself. We will provide you with the evidence of payment, right? All of this can be done over email. So to be done over email correspondence, we indicate all of this for you. Again, in terms of asset management, for example, maybe you have certain cash that you have with certain asset management companies. We will again be ensuring that you are receiving reports on how those asset managements, how those liquid assets are being managed. We will also be doing maybe inspections to ensure that the asset manager is actually investing your funds according to the asset guidelines, that the investment guidelines that you provided to those fund managers as well. Again, it's just, it would just be, how can I put it? It would just be email correspondence, and it would just be us acting on your behalf. This is not, again, when we need to hire third parties as well, we will let you know, okay, we think that we should hire, because some of these things are not, or some of these things are a little bit outside of our field. So we might need to appoint certain third parties, but we will let you know ahead of time that, oh, this person needs to be whatever. But usually how all of this will start out is with a meeting. So we would have a meeting to begin with. And at that meeting, we would, in the course of conversation, you will tell us what your desires are, what your goals are, what the size of your assets is, where you wish for your assets to be in 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, where the beneficiaries you have, for example, when it comes to education trust, what schools do you want them to go to? Right. So again, we would indicate that, we would put all of this together, and we would draft it into a trust deed. And we would then ensure that your trust arrangements work in accordance with the instructions that you have provided in that trust deed. I don't know if I've answered everything, but my MD is
Thank
also here too.
I think
I
so.
just wanted to add that thankfully, thanks to Zoom and Teams, we can have virtual meetings. Yes, we're speaking to clients that are in diaspora. We have meetings on Zoom, on Teams, whichever one is your preference. And in those meetings, of course, we get clarity. And if you happen to now come to Nigeria, then we'll have a physical one. But distance is not an issue. We'll have those meetings. And I also now wanted to give examples that it doesn't even have to be education trust for children. You can have an education trust for a niece or nephew that is in Nigeria, or a relative that you want the trustees to handle those funds that you have transferred. So what we've done, and we're doing it right now for some clients, is we get those funds, we ascertain the school that the child is in, and we pay directly to the schools and then send you the receipt. So you are sure that the money you've transferred does not disappear into another relative's pocket or into thin air. And we give accounts, we render accounts to you regularly as we have agreed in the trust deed. Thank you.
Okay, so that's good to know. Well, I'm trying to delay things, but I've been getting the request of egole. how much. So, so I think, you know, I do want to give you guys a chance to talk about that. But for people on the call, you know, there's going to be the opportunity to book sessions with Emerging Africa Trustees, where you can have the one-on-one sessions. We'll send out that link. There's going to be a paid consulting session. And for those on the call, we will also send out a discount code that you can use to get a discount. But we'll talk some more about the cost, right? I'll give you some time a bit later to just talk about this. Everyone, please just hang on. I know there have been a couple of requests around how much the services cost. I just want to go back and maybe ask some more questions that came in. Like one here is that how do you safeguard a house and land properties that are vacant? I would think that you've answered it kind of, right. If that's put under the trust, then you guys can handle that. You'll find the appropriate people. But for a house that's vacant, if you use that as an example, how would you do that? Would you actually go out and recruit, let's say, a caretaker or somebody to be monitoring the house?
Yes. Well, based on what we've agreed with you, we'll get it protected forever, you know, whether it's a security guard. And if it's property that is not in the village, because I'm assuming that it's not just property in the village you're speaking about. If it's property that is in a rentable area, we'll engage real estate agents to get it rented and then monitor so that the property is not just lying fallow in Nigeria.
Okay. So that's good to know. So we've talked a lot about the individual, right? But I know that people also have businesses, you know. People also have businesses, you know, and can someone who's living in diaspora and has a business in Nigeria, is there a way that your service can also be used for that business?
I think that speaks to our nominee services, right, Toye?
Yes.
Yes, if there's a business head, yeah. Go on.
No. So you were speaking. Don't worry. I'll wait.
Okay.
So that speaks. We had already presented on one of our private trusts, the nominee service. So we can act as directors in the company and protect your interests for those businesses. And if we now require experts, we'll inform you.
Yeah.
And appoint experts with your consent. But yes, we can act as directors.
We'll hold shares for you. We'll act as directors for you. We would also receive dividends on your behalf, which of course will be reported to you. We can also, you know, maybe when AGM meetings happen, you know, you can relate to us what you want us to vote for, you know, what interest you want us to vote for. That would also be done by us as well. And of course, you know, as I stated before, any general meetings that you want us to go to, we will go to, and we will report to you on the minutes of those meetings as well. And then, of course, as stated before, you know, if you want to, you know, you have people that are wary of kidnappers today, and they don't want their business interests known to the general public because they don't know who, you know, they don't want people sort of guessing what their net worth might be, right? So you want to
protect.
Want
privacy. They just want privacy.
And they want to be very discreet and be very private. And so that's one of those service that we render to our clients.
Okay. So that's good to know. So just try to speed up a bit. So a question just came in that said, are trusts that are domiciled in Nigeria legal jurisdiction protected from US inheritance laws?
So that one is interesting because, you know, you have situations where, again, I guess it will depend on if you're an American citizen. Because, you know, when you are an American citizen, there are certain, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Taxations that are specific for, there are certain tax treaties between Nigeria and the US, depending on your citizenship status as an American. But I think maybe that is something that we can research on and we can come back to you later on. But I don't know if my MD has if she has an answer to that question.
On the face of it, a trust is a shield, over your assets from sometimes even from yourself if you make it non-discretionary, you understand? So it depends on the terms of on the type of trust that you set up. If it's a trust that gives us total control, I believe, uh, as Toya has said, subject to consulting with our tax consultants, that American tax cannot attach to those assets. Yeah, the American tax process cannot apply to those assets. But we can come back to whoever asked that question. If we engage you, as Obina has said, then we can give you further details.
As stated before, if they are not, if the beneficiaries are not U.S. citizens, if the settlor is not a U.S. citizen, I don't think that U.S. tax laws would apply to their properties, especially because the property is domiciled in Nigeria. So I don't think the U.S. has any sort of power over those whatever. But again, when it comes to U.S. citizens, you have certain, tax treaties between Nigeria and the US that might come into question. But again, like I've stated, we will do our research to find out, what the overall answer to that is.
Yeah, so he's responded. He says he looks forward to a consultation on the question. Yes. So we'll definitely follow up, with that and then get back to him. So so just want to speed this up a little bit. Just one last question that came in. Question says, what's the most effective way to deploy the structure to include funeral costs and similar expenses? So that's the verbatim question. So I'll leave that for you to shape it or answer it directly.
There's the most effective way. I believe Toye had touched on that briefly in the presentation, is to appoint us as trustees. If you appoint us as trustees, we'll set up a living trust. And in that living trust, we have a collaboration with a funeral home, one of the best in Nigeria. And in the meetings, if you want your funeral process and expenses discussed and tied, as good as tied down, then we'll engage them to be part of the meetings. Typically, we'll now find out the going cost for what you want concerning funeral expenses and that. And then it will be part of the funds that we'll be holding in trust towards the funeral. We actually have some trust clients who have their living trust is running, but their funeral expenses is embedded in the funds that we are holding in trust. And in setting up that trust, we also engaged the funeral experts that we have a collaboration with. So there is like a tripartite arrangement. So yes, we can handle your funeral expenses. Some funds being held, of course.
Okay, so that's good to know. Let's see. So just to, I guess we'll try to start wrapping up now. So I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the cost that we're getting a lot of questions around. What is it structured like? How's the service structured? I think we've had enough about what you can do, but just giving an idea of, okay, what, if somebody's outside and wants to engage you, how do they start? What does it look like month after month? And what is the cost? Is it a one-time cost? Is it monthly? Oh, go ahead, please.
Okay. For our fees, I don't think really it's something we should be discussing now, since we're just telling you what you can do with your assets in Nigeria. But I'll just give you generic position of fees for trust. But we usually have a sign-on fee, and then we have an annual trustee fee, and it's subject to negotiation. Okay. So you don't add to that, but really, yes, we have a sign-on fee, and then annual trustee fee for private trustees.
But I can assure you that our fees are very considerate, very affordable, very, again, it's still also subject to negotiation as well. And, basically once we, based on, the interview process, based on, the scale of the scope of work that you expect us to do, the scale of the activities involved, we would then, give you a sort of, idea of what we think we should, charge. But again, like I said, this is still subject to negotiation, and our fees are very considerate and very affordable.
Okay, so that's good to know. So I think everyone's heard, to get the exact fees, reach out to them directly. We'll put in the email address in the chat and then also send that out as well. And the website has been shared. If you can please be shared again, so that at least people can access the website directly and have the email to send their questions in. And like I mentioned, there's actually going to be a site where you can actually go and book a consultation directly at a time that's convenient for you, and that will be shared shortly as well. The session is recorded, and a recording of the session will go out to everybody, and it will be available on the public channels as well, on social media and other channels. Let's see. There's something that just came in a second. Okay. It says it's important for the general interested public to know the fee schedule. For example, is it 1% of the total asset value, like it's done in investment portfolio management? Just an advice.
Okay. I saw the question from Michael Abulume that is it 1%? So that's why we said it's negotiable, depending on the, like Toye has just mentioned, it depends on how should I say how I don't say onerous, depending on how much work we have to do. And if it's just a plain vanilla transaction, that in fact there's nothing like plain vanilla in trust, because you'll now find out that there's so much benefit to be gained in adding on other duties or rules for the trustee to handle. But we can charge 1% or more or less. So a lot depends on what type of trust we are handling and our duties involved in that trust. So it's not a plain vanilla fee that we charge, but depending on the assets involved, it can be percentage driven or a flat figure. So that's why Toye said it's very affordable and negotiable. Thank you.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I'm sure he would want some follow-up, so we'll definitely make sure that we share the contact information out there. So quickly, there's one more question in here that came in early, but I left for last. Is that, please, can you go over what an offshore trust is again? So if you can just do that quickly, please. And
okay. So quickly, offshore trust. What is an offshore trust? So we have an offshore trust basically just means a trust that exists, over different countries. So you have situations where a Nigerian can have properties in the UK, properties in the US, properties in different parts of the world. And you now want to manage those estates, right? So typically, what an offshore trust is just basically the word to define that trust arrangement that exists not just in Nigeria, but also offshore in different parts of the world as well. And so what would usually entail is that because a Nigerian trustee cannot act on an estate that exists in a different jurisdiction, but they can set up a sort of trust arrangement with their international partner that exists in that jurisdiction. That person would then be working in sync with your Nigerian trustee. Yeah. Right. So if, for example, you have a property in the US, in Nigeria, in Canada, you would have a system where there will be 3 trust partners that would be working together in sync in your interest. Now, because you have those 3 trust partners, they would be working together. So you would have like a centralized trust arrangement. There will be a commonality, what's what I'm looking for, a sort of legal commonality between those 3 trust partners. They will try to harmonize your asset management as much as possible, and they will try to work together as much as possible. They will be sending you reports, sort of synchronized reports based on all the assets that you have. Depending on who you want, you can appoint. So, if, for example, you can appoint the Nigerian trustee to be the lead trust house. So that lead trust house will be directing the other trust companies on your wishes and desires. And then so we'll all be working together on that one trust. And then, of course, in terms of your fees as well, it will be much cheaper for you to have that sort of trust arrangement than if you have 3 different trust arrangements. I don't know if you get what I mean. So it's, in a way, it's like I think a good example would be like if you had DSTV, right? DSTV gives you multiple stations on its cable platform, and you pay a single fee to the DSTV company to get access to those multiple stations, rather than you having to subscribe to CNN, subscribe to Fox News, subscribe to MTV, and you're paying different payments to each of those different stations. You're basically getting a service provider that provides you all those stations for a very cheap subsidized price. So that's in a way how offshore trust works. I don't know if you have any, and of course, part of the benefits of that offshore trust is, sort of we help with tax benefits. We help you to register your trust in a tax regime that is favorable to you. And again, it's just I don't know. It's just a syndicated trust that works across multiple jurisdictions that is anchored by us, the lead trustee. I don't know if
Right.
that is
Okay. So that's good. So thank you for that. Just before we wrap up, so one more thing in mind. I know when we were having a conversation, there was a mention of, I think if I remember correctly, charitable trust or something where as a charity you could have a charity under a trust, right? And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I was asking if there was a way where a lot of the charitable activities that are done by the diaspora can be rolled up under a charitable trust in Nigeria so that they can get some tax benefits. Because I think you also mentioned some tax benefits of that structure. So if you can quickly just run us through the charity or philanthropy part of the trust service.
okay. So again, we have situations where people want to donate money to causes in Nigeria, but they are worried about, if that money will actually make its way to those to the intended beneficiaries, right? So you have situations where you've transferred money uh to the company, but in the process of the sort of, how can I move it, the process of the foreign exchange changing hands, you find that, or in the process of the distributing of those funds, you find that maybe you sent $100, but only $5 makes its way to the actual intended beneficiaries, right? With a trustee, you can make sure that, the money that should go to those beneficiaries actually makes its way to those beneficiaries. Like, we send it directly to those beneficiaries. Again, you can also create a charity foundation of your own, which would work with the rest of your assets. So you can say, okay, you know what, I want you guys to manage my assets, and I want maybe 3% of my assets to go towards this foundation, and this foundation is set for these specific goals, right? So you've set the foundation for these specific goals, and so what we'll do is autonomously. So even without your instruction, even without you having to instruct us every month, autonomously 3% of your funds, of your assets will be going towards that fund every year, and autonomously it will be going towards your intended beneficiaries, right? And this could be, based on while the client is still alive, or even after they have passed on, even when their beneficiaries are now in whatever, the assets, those funds will still be going towards those beneficiaries. So in a way, we have sort of preserved your legacy. It's just like if you have Bill and Melinda Gates, even though Bill and Melinda Gates are no longer together, right? I think they've separated or divorced now, but Bill and Melinda Gates still functions as a trust, as a charity foundation, and it still works towards the benefit of Africans and Nigerians. And then if Bill and Melinda Gates leave this world tomorrow, that foundation will still be there because there are experts that are there to ensure its survival and to ensure that the legacy of Bill and Melinda Gates continues at least for the near future, right? So that's a sort of example of what we are capable of doing for you as well. And then, of course, we also help to, whatever tax reliefs, whatever tax breaks that come to you by benefit of engaging in corporate social responsibility in Nigeria, we would also work to make sure that you benefit from those tax breaks as well. And when I say charity is not just charity. We have clients, for example, who want to leave money for their churches, right? So again, we can also help with that. So we would dedicate, maybe, some people say they want to leave tithe for their churches. So autonomously, we would just be, taking out 10% and be providing to the church. And that can be again while you are still here with us, and while the client is no more, the percentage can still be going towards their favorite church, in the future.
Yes. Thank you, Toye. And I just want to address that we can set up the foundations for any charity that the client has in mind. We have our contacts at the Corporate Affairs Commission that facilitate and fast track the process. So it doesn't take long to set up a foundation. Thank you.
Okay. So there, thanks for that. So it's good to hear that at least there are some tax benefits that can be accrued to the individual. So I do think that there's something there where that can be explored to see how people who are in the diaspora that come into Nigeria to do a lot of philanthropy work, there might be a way for them to take advantage of the structure that exists and then get some tax benefit, because for right now, I think most people just do it as a labor of love, use their own money and use their own time, and don't get anything really back, that they can use. So at this point, I know it's been a pretty engaging session. I think we can just wrap up. So I'm just going to give you just a minute, maybe, to just talk to the audience and just tell them again about Emerging Africa Trustees, why we should all come through you. And then again, we reiterate that there will be the recording sent out, and so you can share that, you can watch that again, and you can share it with your friends. There's going to be a link sent to you where you can actually book your consultation with the Emerging Africa Trustees. And you will watch out for this on social media as well. And if you still have questions, please send in your questions as well. We'll continue to answer the questions. And there have been some requests for consultation, so we'll definitely reach out to the individuals directly as well. So I'll give Toye and Felicia, give you, like a minute to just wrap us up, and thank you all for such a wonderful and engaging conversation.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know, my MD, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Okay, thank you so much. Just on behalf of Toye and I and the Emerging Africa Trustees, and in fact the Emerging Africa Group, we want to say we truly appreciate time spent with us. We hope that you've been able to gain insights, as promised, into how to manage your inheritances, your properties that are in Nigeria, We've given you clarity and comfort to know that Emerging Africa Trustees will be able to, if appointed or when appointed, assist you in ensuring that assets that are in Nigeria do not go into thin air or go into someone's pocket for anybody and for any purpose that you want. And then we look forward to hearing from you. We have stated before, the Emerging Africa Group consists of 10 subsidiaries, of which Emerging Africa Trustees is one of them. We have asset management, we have an advisory, we have a microfinance bank, we have fintech, and in all this, we are all duly regulated by either the CBN and for us, Emerging Africa Trustees by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So aside from the fact that we have well over should I say 100 years experience collectively, we also have, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, having oversight over us. And with that, you can be rest assured that your funds, your assets, whatever it is we hold in trust for you in Nigeria will not disappear into thin air, as has been experienced with some entities or some individuals that you have reposed confidence in. We expect it to repose major, in fact, massive confidence in us. And we look forward to hearing from you. I believe Obina is going to share on the screen our contacts, our websites, our email addresses, our phone numbers, and we're available. We are here to ensure that your goals are achieved. That's even our mantra in the Emerging Africa Group. Our clients' goals are meant to be achieved, and we look forward to assisting you achieve your goals concerning assets and any issue that you have concerning your property in Nigeria. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for engaging us and answering a lot of our questions and allaying our fears. A lot of people in the diaspora are pretty apprehensive about dealing with Nigeria. But I think after this session, I think it's clear. Just put your trust and your resources in the hands of Emerging Africa Trustees, and you can relax and be sure that things will get done the way that you want them to get done. And this is a good opportunity to, build generational wealth, as they say. There's been a lot of conversation around what's going to happen to the next generation, especially now that a lot of people are out in the diaspora. So thank you all again. The email address has been posted in the chat. So please feel free to send emails with any of your questions and watch out for other emails from us. There was a posting here around making this more broadly, spreading this broadly into the diaspora. So that's the goal here. The goal here is to, educate the diaspora about things that are possible to do in Nigeria and reduce some of the apprehension. So yes, there will be more sessions like this, and you will be seeing more about Emerging Africa Trustees. I would say the Emerging Africa Trustees coming soon. Just watch out for them. So thank you again, Felicia and Toye, and to the rest of the staff, for NGEX staff and Emerging Africa staff, for putting this together. And thank you all for attending. And we look forward to a continued and beneficial relationship between everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.